We are back on the other side of Christmas. Tim May, the 41-year vet, Spencer Holbrook. Tim, I hope you had a very Merry Christmas.
I did.
Everyone out there watching, I hope you had a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. Let's talk Ohio State football, Tim. Buckeyes very active in the transfer portal. The 23rd of December was like Ohio State portal day. They got 3 commits. They get another one on Christmas Eve, a nice little Christmas gift for Justin Fry in Ohio State. And then that comes a week after Ohio State landed Philip Daniels, the offensive tackle from Minnesota. It looks like the Buckeyes have their 2 starting tackles for next year in Ethan Anianwa, who was at Rice, in Philip Daniels, who was at Minnesota. They got a running back, a tight end, a defensive lineman, and we're off and running to build the 2025 roster before the 2024 season even concludes, Tim.
Yeah. I mean, the guy that's caught my attention from basically from the videos and everything else is Ethan Anianwa from Rice, originally from Katy, Texas. And I think the name of his high school was Seco Ranch. You don't understand. Katy, Texas, all the suburbs of Houston have just in the last 15, 20 years have exploded. So he comes from a good background from a high school standpoint. And then also, if you watch the video, I think he was the only guy on the Rice offensive line that I would have taken. but an offensive lineman is only as good as the other 4 guys with him, right? From the standpoint of effectiveness. But I really like that kid. And getting a kid from Minnesota, I know, has rankled a lot of Minnesota fans, probably rankled Minnesota's coaching staff greatly. But Philip Daniels, originally from Princeton High School down there on the north side of Cincinnati. I mean, I think it was vital, and I think you agree with me, don't you, that Spence, that they get a couple of credible offensive linemen and preferably tackles, because it's been Rob Peter to pay Paul at tackle now for several years, because we all thought Josh Fryer's future was as a guard, but I think he's played very well at right tackle the last couple of years, gotten better as it's gone along. And of course, we know their glorified left guard playing left tackle, Donovan Jackson, who's grown into a beast, in my opinion, at that spot. But, just from a coverage standpoint, some bona fide tackles in there, it looks like they picked them up. Final judgment will come once we see them and once we see them play for Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree, Tim. But I think, Philip Daniels started the last 4 games of the year for Minnesota, played really well in those 4 games. I think he gave up 1 sack. You look at Ethan Anianwa, who had a really, really good year at Rice and has played some good competition mixed in with obviously some lower level competition for the Owls. They don't play great teams every year, but, it's worth noting that both of these guys were targeted by Ohio State. They really liked what they put on the field. Ethan Anianwa, 549 total snaps for Rice in 2024, 836 in 2023, 860 in 2022. A lot of football played by that guy. He played right tackle for the Owls in 2023. He played left tackle for the Owls in 2024. He gave up 1 sack in 2024. It was against Navy. So no sacks against, Houston, a power 4 opponent, no sacks against Army, a pretty good defensive front. It's impressive what he's done. I don't think he gave up a sack in that Texas game in 2023. Philip Daniels is a guy who, though, you take because he's got Big Ten experience. You trust the development that you're going to, put that guy through this offseason. You also trust that, he's Paris Johnson's cousin, which, familial relations don't really, that's not really, that doesn't really matter. But at the same time, like, you trust, like, when you hear from certain people. And I think the feedback that they got from Paris's family was good. And so you trust that. So I really like both of these pickups. And like you said, like, the proof will be in the pudding come spring and come training camp. But it appears that those will be your starting tackles for next year. I think Daniels will play the right tackle, and I think Anianwa will play left tackle.
Yeah, I think Paris Johnson Jr.'s mom, Monica Daniels, was quite fired up to see this transfer. And, of course, the proof will come in the pudding. Just like, it's funny because they get the kid from the tight end from Purdue, for example, and I liked him. I liked the way he ran around and stuff. I mean, it was hard to judge who's really good from Purdue, right, with the mess that they had for a season the last couple of years, but definitely this year. And but it's just, man, when you get guys from inside your own conference, number one, you know you're going to rankle people, and then number two, you know it's almost imperative that they be decent, if not really good. And so I think Max Clair has that possibility. The tight end they got from Purdue, which is, you know, wow, not a house fire. I don't know what would you call them, Spence? At least a brush fire, for sure. And you know, and then the Logan George kid is the one that's interesting to me because uh, man, you can look at video on him and he's a terror at times, right? Uh, but you know, just as a group, as a defensive group, how good was that team? You know what I mean? And then, but he has some standout video, that's for sure. And I think he's an older, you know, older young man. I mean, he was part of the 2020, 2021 class when he first signed up. So what they're getting here, just like they got in terms of maturity, they're getting guys like Seth McLaughlin and Will Howard, you know, grown men, you know, for want of another term, and in this group of transfers, which I think bodes well from the standpoint of coming in. Obviously, Philip Daniels was a 2023 guy, but he's played, he's shown some moxie, everything you want to see from a transfer who can bring some maturity possibly to the team. But the rest of these guys are a little bit older, and I think that bodes well for Ohio State in terms of getting something out of them immediately. I truly believe, I'm going to write a story about this. I think the future of offensive line recruiting, even though you want to develop your own, there's a big difference between a guy coming out of high school who's dominated in high school, who then kind of becomes a wallflower in college. And we've seen some examples of that at Ohio State, a lot of examples of that, of guys who were, boy, can't miss 4 and 5 star dudes who all of a sudden do miss.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you bring a guy who's been in college for 2-3 seasons, he's already put on video that, yeah, he has the wherewithal to play. And I'd much rather recruit an offensive lineman at 20 years old than 18, just because of that factor. Because really, I mean, we've seen Ohio State plumb the depths of his depth chart this year in terms of the offensive line play. And Luke Montgomery suddenly is playing like the guy they thought he could play as it coming out as a freshman. And he's playing in a totally different position he thought he would play at. So I think most coaches, if you really pinned them down, would like to see, you know, if not coming out of college after 2 or 3 seasons, you'd like to see them come out of prep school, you know, after a season of after their final season in high school, but coming out of prep school where they've had to go against light competition. And how did they fare going against, you know, larger, stronger, faster defensive linemen? And so these guys fit the bill, the 2 offensive linemen they got, from what I've seen on video.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tim, because if you were to pay a 5-star defense or offensive lineman to commit and play for you, that's a really expensive ask. And I
Yes.
think the Buckeyes have gotten 2 starting offensive linemen from the transfer portal for the price that they hypothetically could have paid a certain 5-star offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Who happened to go to the school that they just beat in the playoff. So,
yeah.
you know,
Beat badly.
of course,
they did a beat down, I think was our headline, right?
It's a hypothetical, but you know, if they were to go after a 5-star and he signed with the school that they played in the college football playoff, that would cost just as much as what they're going to end up getting almost a starting offensive line for.
True.
So I think Ohio State is weighing the risks and the rewards of going after high school guys versus going after guys who have proven themselves elsewhere from the transfer portal. Where they, I think, added some good depth is on the defensive line, like you already said. Logan George from Idaho State, he's already signed. He's in the boat, Tim, as they say. Kenyatta Jackson expected to come back. Hayden Curry expected to come back. Those 2 will be the leaders of this defensive line for next year. The interior, I think, is a little more up for grabs as far as who's going to be the stars in there. Hero Canoe played well against Tennessee. I thought Caden McDonald continues to progress. He's kind of had a few ups and downs, but I think he looks overall like he's going to be a good player for them. A couple other guys in the mix there on the interior, but the edge, you know, Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson, and you add Logan George, and you either have a viable backup there or a good rotational piece with those two starters. I like this pickup.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of defensive linemen come up. The best example is Jared Verse, who went from Albany up to Florida State, became a first-round pick. Like, don't dismiss the team Idaho State just because you see that Bengals logo. Logan George, I think, is a good player that Ohio State targeted, that a lot of colleges around the country, upper level, higher level, power fours targeted, and the Buckeyes went out for him. So they're going to, have his services. And I think that's a good win for them. And I think it's probably a low risk pickup there for the Buckeyes.
Yeah. But when you watch his video, when you watch highlight video of him, he's got that Caden Curry a little bit in him, and from standpoint, I see Caden Curry is one of the great guys, nice guys to talk to. He's got that nasty. You can see he's got that nasty in him. You know what I mean? That nasty streak. And Logan George looks like that kind of guy. Kenyatta Jackson, man, boy did he get. I was going to say robbed is not the right term. Did he get? I'm not going to say the other word starts with an S. And he got wronged. There we go. He got wronged on that roughing the passer penalty, for example. But, you've seen him in the latter part of the season continually getting into the picture and making plays. But, yeah, they get a guy that just comes in and just augments that group. I think they're looking okay for next year. Clearly, the defensive line is going to be in a rebuilding sense, if nothing else, reputationally, of guys you know about and guys you don't. That's just natural when you're going to lose four guys, the likes of Sawyer, Tuimoloau, and the two ties. It's natural that these guys are going to have to grow on some Ohio State fans, and they're going to have to grow up in a hurry, obviously, opening with Texas. But the bottom line is, that's why you go out and sometimes you can go out and recruit maturity. And Logan George looks like the guy who wants to prove himself on the bigger stage, is a better way of putting it, I think.
Yeah. And, hats off to him for trying to do that, and hats off for Ohio State for identifying that he might be a guy that's capable of doing that. We're talking so much about the 2025 roster, but the 2024 season is not even close to over, Tim. So,
No.
Because Ohio State could play 3 more games.
Yeah.
One of those games is in the Rose Bowl against Oregon. Lettermen Row will be there in full force. Tim May and I both will be out in Pasadena for the Rose Bowl. If you would like to be there, you can go to Game Time, the Game Time app, gametime.co. I'm looking at the map right now for the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. There are tickets for as low as $227. Don't ask me about flights. We don't have a sponsor on flights, but I will tell you, Game Time is the place to go to get those tickets if you can get your way. If you can find your way out to Pasadena. $227 is pretty cheap to get into the greatest college football event every year. Watch the sunset over the San Gabriels. Watch the Buckeyes and Ducks. It's going to be a lot of fun. And you can use
it's supposed to be. Wait a minute, let me interrupt you. It's supposed to be very nice, 70 degrees, partly cloudy on game day.
You got to use the code. You got to use the code ON3 to get $20 off your first purchase. That's right, ON3, ON3 to get $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app. GameTime.co is the place to go. Use the Game Time Picks feature. It allows you to customize the way that you see all of your tickets. You'll be able to see the Rose Bowl tickets in all of their glory. $227 is a pretty nice asking price for the granddaddy of them all. Use the Game Time app and GameTime.co. Make that experience a lot easier. With the Game Time app and GameTime.co, use the code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. But Tim, they're still building this 2025 roster out. I'm assuming that even after the college football playoff, they'll lose a couple more to the transfer portal, just because that's the way this sport goes nowadays.
Yep.
We at Lettermen Row don't speculate on who that could be, but we do know that they're adding 2 skill players to the offense. Yes, they still need skill players on the offense. I know what you're thinking. Don't they need linemen? Well, we just talked about the linemen. Go back, rewind about 10 minutes and listen to that. CJ Donaldson, a productive running back from West Virginia, was never really West Virginia's top running back, number 1 back, but he was a really productive, good player for the Mountaineers, a brute. He's 6'2", like 225. He's a really big physical runner, the kind of guy that they really like having in the room. Bigger than what we're used to at Ohio State, probably more of the Mayan Williams mold, although he's a little taller than Mayan. Just in the way that he's built, I think he could be a good short yardage back, a good third down back, somebody in the red zone who can help you out inside the 5. And then the big fish, which is, one of the bigger pickups that we've seen Ohio State make in the transfer portal, over the last few years. Obviously Caleb Downs is the number one. And in hindsight, Seth McLaughlin was a huge one, and
Yeah.
Quinshon Judkins. But but in the moment, Seth wasn't that big of a get. And then Quinshon, I think, was a really big one, obviously, as well. So Quinshon and Caleb were probably the two biggest in the last few years. But I mean, you go into the portal, you find the number 6 overall player, you find the number 1 tight end in the portal, Max Clair, Cincinnati St. Xavier product, went to Purdue, really good player at Purdue. Terrorized, for a little bit. He was moving the ball against Penn State, doing things against that defense. He's really quick. He's a good route runner. He's a good blocker, just an all-around weapon. And this kind of came out of nowhere. He took visits elsewhere. He was in contact with Ohio State, didn't visit the Buckeyes, and then commits and lands at Ohio State. And Chip Kelly and Keenan Bailey and Ryan Day have their new tight end toy to play with for next year. That's an exciting pickup for this team, Tim.
Absolutely. Touched on it earlier, and he's a guy who's proven he can play in the Big Ten. You understand what I'm saying? I mean,
oh yeah,
that's what stands out to me about him. And anytime tight has been a curious spot, obviously. Because like you pointed out, one of your favorite transfers of all time was Will Kazmarek, right? Coming from your alum, your alma mater, Ohio University. Boy, who knows how good he could have been this year, right? Barring the injury at Oregon. Boy, you think he doesn't have doesn't have a little bit of revenge or axe to grind or whatever you want to call it, even though, he landed funny in that game and left the game and didn't come back until the last several games. But yeah, picking up this Clair kid, I'm like I said, you watch video of him and he fits the bill of what you want in a tight end in the Big Ten. Could he be slightly larger? Maybe, that would really help. But I'm telling you what, man, he's even got to be fired up when he saw that 4 tight end set that Ohio State ran for a touchdown against Tennessee from the standpoint of having a lead fullback tight end and then 3 other tight ends on the field, including Jelani Thurman. And the thing about Clair is, like I said, he will come in competing immediately for playing time, possibly for starting time. I don't know if you agree or not, but that's going to be an interesting competition in the spring for sure.
Yeah, Jelani's going to be there. Will Kazmarek has another year. Bennett Christian has more time. They really like Max LeBlanc and his future. I had heard from some people that Nate Roberts was a guy who could come in and compete and play right away as a true freshman potentially. It's a loaded room. I don't know if it wasn't going to be loaded with stars until Max Clair committed. So now you have kind of a star there.
Right.
But if you're looking at guys who can all play 25 snaps a game, I think you're looking at the right room. If you're looking for a guy who can play 50 or 60 snaps in a game, maybe this isn't the room for you. So I like this pickup. You don't want to put it in too stupid of terms. And we'll obviously talk about this more in January when we go some position by position roster resets, because we'll do those at lettermenrow.com. We'll do some videos about those too. This is kind of just scratching the surface of all of this, because we'll move on and finish up here, Tim, with CJ Donaldson, who, I let off this little segment after the ad break, like a good player, not somebody who is going to be like the number 1 tailback and not somebody who's going to have 1,500 yards in a season, but somebody who's going to really grind, who's going to run really hard, and who's going to be a veteran presence in the room for James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon and the 3 freshmen they brought in. I like this last pickup here, and I'm not saying last as in like they're done, because I think Ohio State still has some more coals in the fire, or irons in the fire, I guess, if you will. Pardon me, but I think that there's still some stuff in the works. But I think as of now, CJ Donaldson is a really good pickup as we wrap things up here. Yeah,
well, obviously, the thing that stands out about him is his pure size. 6'2", 240, 235. Just
big guy.
Don't weigh him before and after lunch, I guess is what I would say. But kind of a back they haven't had for a while, right? Of any repute. Let's put it that way. And when you watch him, I wouldn't call him spectacular by any stretch, from a standpoint of running style, but he does give you somebody who can lean on you. And we all know that Ohio State wants to be even now, they got their act together running the ball against Tennessee. I think everybody could see that based on the way they ran the ball against Michigan. But you want to be more brutal, if you can be more violent at the point of attack. And this guy's kind of a walking, talking, violent kind of runner. If you watch the video on him, but I think they will be, as you say, still active in the running back aspect of things in the portal to see if they can get one, a guy opposite of this, for more of another term, to go with James Peoples, more to complement James Peoples than maybe this guy. But in the old days, I think you would almost call this guy a fullback, but he's approaching Derrick Henry size, but I wouldn't put him in that category in terms of ability. But sometimes when guys get a new lease on life, they blossom, and I'll be interesting to watch him and see how they're using him in the spring. So I'm not struggling here. I'm just trying to think of the best way of somebody he reminds you of. He actually reminds you more of a fullback to me than he does a fleet running back. So he'll be a curious guy to watch how they work into the lineup, what they do new with having him and maybe a James Peoples in the lineup. Because you heard me ask Chip Kelly a week or so ago that I thought we would see more Quinshawn and Travion Henderson on the field at the same time. And he said, well, they play the same position. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I know that, but I thought they were going to use them more of a triple threat, including Will Howard, who can run the ball, to kind of set defenses off. Are they going left, right, through the middle? What are they doing? And they never really got to that kind of package. I thought they were working on one in the spring and summer, but we'll see if that shows up against Oregon. But going back to what we're saying, I mean, when this guy's on the field, you got to respect, you got to bring some wood to deal with Mr. Donaldson.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. And the 2025 roster is starting to come together. The 2024 roster, it's still playing. So we've got a lot more to talk about at lettermenrow.com. We're going to talk on Friday a couple different times maybe about this Ohio State push for a national championship, the game against Oregon. The Rose Bowl is quickly approaching. We're less than a week away from kickoff in Pasadena. Tim May, the 41-year vet, he's got to get out of here. He's going to be on the radio. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the Portal Report at Lettermen Row. We'll be back with a Rose Bowl report on Friday, and we'll see you guys in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Friday because we got some interviews to break down. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then it'll be wheels up for Tim May and I. We're going to head out to Pasadena. We'll see you guys out there. We'll see you over at lettermenrow.com.